And a very good morning to all you vaqueros. Welcome from live from our Edinburgh studio. This is All In with Ali. Thank you for tuning in. We got a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into it. First off, let's recap Week 9 of the NFL season, starting with the Texans and the Jets. And oh my God, I didn't expect not only the game to be that close, but for the Jets to pull out a win against the Texans. I mean, I know the Texans have dealt with injury issues, especially at the wide receiver position, and they might be out Will Anderson for a while now. We're still awaiting status on him, but that was surprising. As the reason you can pin this loss is mostly on the Texans line. I mean, their offensive line has they've never been known for having a good offensive line, but they were struggling a bit there. Last year, C.J. Stroud was able to have such an incredible rookie season because he had the time in the pocket, and just this year, it's not there. You're not giving C.J. Stroud time to read the field. You're not giving him any time in the pocket. It collapses as soon as the ball is snapped, pretty much. And so that's really what it boils down to. Nico Collins might be back soon, but it might help the Texans to trade for a backup wide receiver just to shore up some of that depth because they're down. They're out Stephon Diggs for the year. Tank Dell's picking up all the workload, and Nico Collins, he may or may not be returning this week, but having a backup wideout to help fill the role to at least give some depth after Stephon Diggs is gone, that might help. Big time help if they can get some assistance on that O line. Trade deadline's on the 5th of November. Oh, it's already passed. Today's the 7th, so we'll have that recap for you in another segment. But let's talk about the next game that I want to talk about in week 9. That's the Saints and the Panthers. And I mean, the Saints have just been an absolute mess since the end of week 2. They started 2-0. We're thinking, oh, this team they might make some noise. And then it's just gone from bad to worse to way worse. And I mean, Chris Olave might be out for an extended period of time after he took a nasty shot off the head in that game. And several Saints players on Twitter took to Twitter to basically call out Derek Carr for throwing a hospital pass. And I mean, they're not exactly wrong. That pass was thrown straight into double coverage, and it was by almost every metric a hospital pass. And the only bright side for Saints fans after this is the blow up has started. Dennis Allen got fired after this game. After starting 2-0, they lost their next 7 after that. They're 2-9 right now. They're 2-7 right now, I should say. 2-7, no chance of making the playoffs, and that would possibly be one of the worst collapses of the NFL season so far. But speaking of collapses, another pretty bad collapse this week, the Dallas Cowboys. Oh my goodness. I mean, what is it about the Dallas Cowboys that I haven't already said in previous weeks on this show? I mean, it's no running game. I mean, they went into this week with one of the worst They went into this week with one of the worst running games in football. Um, and now Dak Prescott's announced that he's going to be out long term. I mean, you might as well close the book on this season, Cowboys fans, because it's over. It's as good as over. Dak's going to be out long term. There's no running game. Too many injuries piled up on defense. I mean, I would be surprised if they sneak into the playoffs, but that's not a possibility anymore at this stage of the proceedings. It's over. Start thinking about next year. Usually, the thinking about next year for the Dallas Cowboys is in January, but it seems to have come early now in November, and well, I think there's nothing more that I've already said that I can say about the Dallas Cowboys that I haven't already said last week, that I didn't say the week before, or that I didn't say after that surprising loss to the Cleveland Browns this year. I mean, and the Dallas Cowboys were bad enough already, but to add insult to injury, Dak is going to be out long term after getting paid all that money. It's a disaster over in Dallas, and we'll talk some more when we recap the NFL trade deadline after this. Next game to talk about in Week 9, Bucks and Chiefs over that In an overtime win for the Kansas City Chiefs, they remain undefeated on the year at 8-0. And just a couple of thoughts about this. First of all, the overtime rules in the regular season make no sense. I mean, the overtime rules in the NFL barely did. They changed it to sort of more or less mimic college football's overtime rules for the playoffs, but I don't understand why that doesn't extend to the regular season. I mean, it's nonsensical, and the Chiefs, as a result of that, they remain undefeated. I mean, at least give them one shot to give the Bucs a chance to respond. It shouldn't end on the first drive just like that. The overtime rules for the regular season do need to change somewhat. I mean, I get it's a busy season and all that, but it can't end on one drive with no chance to answer back. And that's why I thought the playoff overtime rules made some sort of sense, but in the regular season it doesn't. And so as a result of that, the Chiefs remain probably the most overrated undefeated team on the year, or most overrated undefeated team that I've seen. Looking ahead to Week 10, an AFC North showdown between the Bengals and the Ravens takes place tonight. Bengals looking to get back to 500. Ravens looking to the top, trying to go band for band with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another one to look forward to on Sunday, 49ers and Bucks. Both teams looking for a bounce back, and Christian McCaffrey, he's looming. He's on his way back, and every report I've seen says that he's inching closer and closer and closer to be able to return. But who knows how long he's going to be out? Who knows if he could even get taken off IR? But if he plays this week, it'll make it interesting. If he doesn't play this week, it's still going to be a great game, I feel. Lions and Texans on Sunday night, two of their offenses at their best, and Nico Collins, like I mentioned earlier, he's inching closer and closer to a return this week. And if he does return this week, that will be a huge boost for the Houston Texans going into what is a match against probably I would say the best team in the National Football League right now in the Detroit Lions. That should be an incredible showdown Sunday night on NBC. We'll talk more. We'll talk the trade deadline after this message from Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. And welcome back to All In with Ali. Let's continue our discussion on the NFL. Let's talk some of the moves that were made in the trade deadline. First off, starting with the Pittsburgh Steelers making a couple of good moves, trading for wide receiver Mike Williams to get some depth at that position, to get a 2-3 for George Pickens, with George Pickens on the other side of the field, and they also traded with the Packers to acquire edge rusher Preston Smith. Ravens, not wanting to be left out on the wide receiver frenzy, traded for Deontay Johnson from the Carolina Panthers. So a couple of interesting moves to add depth to the offenses in the AFC North. So that should set up an interesting dynamic in that division. Next up on this, Lions having lost Aiden Hutchinson for the year looked for depth at the pass rush position, and they traded for Zadarius Smith. I thought that was a good move to, sort of supplement the loss that Aiden Hutchinson left. I mean, as good of a defender as Aiden Hutchinson is, and I mean, he's talented, it was terrible that the Lions lost him for the remainder of the season, but it's good on them to get some depth at that position to sort of start eating into those reps that Aiden Hutchinson left behind. And then another trade on defense, big one, as a matter of fact. Saints starting the process of blowing it up and starting to get away from the cap trouble that they're in. Saints moved their start cornerback Marshawn Lattimore to the Washington Commanders. Huge trade to shore up the defense for Washington. And I mean, right now Washington is leading that division. They're 7-2. They have a great team. They have a great quarterback. A lot's looking up and up for Washington recently. So for the Washington Commanders, I should say. For the Washington Commanders, it's looking up. They have a good team. They're leading the NFC East, which right now the Eagles are trying to play catch up. The Commanders have not played the Eagles yet, so they still have 2 games coming up. And with the amount of depth that the Eagles have at the wide receiver position, to get a corner like Marshawn Lattimore, I think that was a good trade for them. And then the Cowboys, like I said earlier, I wasn't done with Dallas just yet. I was not done with the Cowboys just yet. What was Dallas thinking? I mean, they probably weren't. I think they were just panic buying, and they ended up overpaying. They wanted to get some wide receiver help, and they traded for Jonathan Mingo, but they gave up a lot. I mean, they gave up uh, they gave up a fourth essentially for what is the fifth wide receiver on the Panthers roster. I mean, it just befuddles me. It just absolutely confuses me day in, day out what the Dallas Cowboys do. I mean, just when you think that the things can't possibly stoop any lower in that organization, I mean, they go out and they go out and they prove me wrong time and time again, year after year. They prove the NFL wrong as to how low they can go, or as to how bad things could get. I mean, not even targeting Derrick Henry in the offseason and then proceeding to have the worst running game in the National Football League, not knowing that you're going to need help at running back with Tony Pollard leaving. They didn't even not even talking to Derrick Henry's agent. That's certainly a choice, and the Dallas Cowboys made it. And then overpaying for a backup wide receiver. I mean, like I said earlier, Cowboys fans, wrap it up. It's over. That's wraps, and that's the season. And now let's talk a little bit about a shock in the college football scape. I mean, let's talk about the South Carolina Texas A&M game. I mean, that was about as bad of a loss for the Aggies as you can think of. I mean, to not only lose, but to get blown out like that in a game that not only were you more or less guaranteed to win going into it, but a game that you must win to keep your SEC championship hopes alive. That was shocking. I did not expect that at all. I mean, the best chance for the Aggies to get to the SEC championship is to win out the rest of the year, and that's going to be tough to do, especially with top-ranked Texas coming up on the schedule in a couple of weeks. So Texas A&M's got some work to do if they want to sort of try to play catch up and get to the SEC championship game. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll talk about Madrid's struggles. We'll talk NBA, and we'll talk a little bit of F1 after this break. You're listening to Vaquero Radio. Don't touch that dial. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to All In with Ollie. Let's continue. Welcome to the next segment. Let's talk about what's going on with Real, man. What's happening? I mean, there were a lot of expectations, and I mean a lot of expectations placed on Real Madrid this offseason, especially after picking up Mbappe. But they've just haven't gotten the job done in a lot of big games, getting blown out in El Clásico last week. This week, an upset against Milan in the Champions League. I mean, it starts with a lack of depth and the injuries that are piling up, and lack of depth. It's sort of starting to show itself there. Tchouaméni was just announced that Tchouaméni is going to be out for a while. And while all this is happening, Ancelotti's not giving the youth a chance. And I mean, you see it. Endrick and Arda Güler are on the bench while all this is going on. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess, and things need to change, and they need to change now. I mean, something's got to give. They got to start getting on the transfer window in January once that opens, because the injuries are piling up. The team is underperforming, and the simple thing is they have to get their act together, and they have to get their act together now. Now, we're going to go over to another league back here stateside on another team that needs to get their act together soon, the Philadelphia 76ers. And I mean, they've been struggling to start the year is an understatement. There was the whole drama with Embiid's fine, with the fine for Embiid's load management. And then after that, we find out that Embiid would also get suspended for shoving a columnist in the locker room after a game. 3-game suspension announced there. It's not like he was going to start those games anyway, because he doesn't play back to back to back games. Not a lot of players do, but Embiid certainly certainly one of those players who's more known for having an extensive load management done on him by the coaching staff, and it's a struggle. I mean, this is a team that was promised to compete for championships. That the GM told the fans to trust the process. The fans trusted the process, and Embiid is still yet to even crack the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, there are a lot of expectations placed on this team, and they keep falling short. What else can the Sixers do? We'll shift gears a little bit, talk about the Brazilian Grand Prix that happened recently. I mean, what a drive by Max Verstappen that was. To go from in the rain, to go from starting 17th place on the grid to charge to the front and win the race. That effectively places him within striking distance of the World Drivers' Championship, and all but knocks out Lando Norris from competing for that title. And you see, and I don't think Norris is going to end up winning this title, especially with the comments he made after the game saying it was luck. I mean, it takes more than luck to be able to. I mean, I know how the race ended, but still, to be able to go from charging from 17th on the grid to win the race, that's not luck. That takes a lot of skill to do, and Verstappen's showing a lot of that, and he's got a firm lead on the Drivers' Championship. He's within striking distance, and he's probably gonna end up winning it. We'll have to see. We still got some races left on the year, and it's not over till it's over. But it's though Norris did put up a good challenge earlier in the year, it's Verstappen's to lose, and that's certainly shown itself here. We'll take a short break. We'll talk about the MLB offseason and on this day in sports history. That's coming up in the next segment after these messages from Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Welcome back to All In with Ali. Let's discuss the MLB offseason, the exclusive free agent negotiation period, for which basically how it works is after the World Series ends, teams have 5 days to exclusively negotiate with their free agents before they hit the open market. That window has passed, and it's time to fire up the hot stove. First off, especially as an Astros fan, the big free agent saga that I'm paying most attention to is Alex Bregman. Well, his agent Scott Boras just announced that he had some bone chips removed from his elbow, but he should be ready by spring training and opening day. It also was just announced by Scott Boras not too long ago that Bregman is willing to move to second base rather than the position he's played most of his time in the big leagues, which is third base. So that might is that going to be a possibility, or is Scott Boras just saying it to drive up the price for his client? We don't know. It's yet to be seen where he ends up. I would, as an Astros fan, I would love for him to stay in Houston. But Scott Boras clients, by and large, they do end up testing free agency, seeing what's out there, seeing what other teams are offering before they either re-sign with their teams or go away. That's a pattern we've seen with many of Scott Boras's clients, like Garrett Cole, among others that I can think of off the top of my head right now. But another story just announced: Michael Wacha, starting pitcher for the Kansas City Royals, has just signed a 3-year, $51 million extension with Kansas City. This includes a club option to make it a 4-year, $72 million deal if the team wants to keep him around for another season. So that gives more that returns a key piece to the Royals' rotation as a team that wants to compete and make a deep playoff run, or wants to continue making deep playoff runs while they have Bobby Witt Jr. and that excellent young core that they're developing over in Kansas City. A couple more moves to talk about with the Los Angeles Angels. Kyle Hendricks is going over to LA, or to Anaheim, I should say, on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. And at the beginning of the offseason, the Angels traded for Jorge Soler, and they sent starting pitcher Griffin Canning over to the Braves, which sort of begs the question: what are the Angels doing, or what are they trying to do? Because it certainly isn't competing. I mean, Jorge Soler, he's not a very good defender, so he's going to be spending most of those days in the DH spot. Mike Trout, he's getting older. He's not the same defender that he was in his prime, and usually you'd want to give your aging superstar those DH starts to sort of give him a period to rest, but with Jorge Soler there, either Jorge Soler plays out in the outfield and we know he's not very good defensively. Either that or have Jorge Soler clog up the DH spots that we know Mike Trout, as he ages, he's going to be having to take more of those DH starts. And I'm wondering what are the Angels doing? And then also with the Hendricks deal, signing an aging pitcher with a fastball that tops out at 88 miles per hour. I don't know. That's usually not a recipe for success. And this is a question that Angels fans always ask year after year. What are we doing, man? That's enough. That's all I've got so far on the MLB offseason. The stove should get hotter. And if those moves are made, we'll be talking about it here. On this day in sports history, let's talk about it. On this day in 1991, Magic Johnson announced his retirement from the NBA following a preseason checkup and an HIV diagnosis. Since then, Magic has dedicated his life to spreading awareness of HIV and prevention measures and all that. And of course, we know that since then, he's also become part owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, with which under his ownership, since he joined the ownership group that has the majority stake in the Dodgers, they've won 2 World Series rings, one in 2020 and most recently in 2024. 1993, Alan Prost wins his 4th World Drivers' Championship, finishing second at the Australian Grand Prix. After this race, he announced his retirement from Formula One. And on this day in 2021, Kyle Larson wins the NASCAR Cup Series Championship, holding off challenger Martin Truex Jr., Larson winning his 10th race of the season in Phoenix to secure that title. Just a couple reminders for you for future programming here on Vaquero Radio. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., office hours with DJ Doc V. Mondays and Wednesdays, the newscast, biggest stories on campus on 11 o'clock Mondays and Wednesdays. Vaquero Insider at 12:30 on Monday, and The Lounge at 2 p.m. also on Monday. Tuesdays at 11:30, the RGV Community Hour, and 4 p.m. Coffee Noise. Wednesdays, like I said, there's the newscast at 11. At 3 p.m., Quick Hop into Hip Hop. On Thursdays, as you know, I'm here from 11 to 12, and Library Talk at 10 a.m. And just another quick thing, the UTRGV Dean of Students has shared post-election resources that I would like to share with you here. Dean of Students' office is available if you're unsure which resources you'd like to use. Following this, Counseling Center and the Office for Advocacy and Violence Prevention are available for confidential help. The Center for Student Involvement, you can, if you want to coordinate an on-campus event. Timely care is available to all Vaqueros 24/7 for free access to mental health services. Vaqueros crisis line at 956-665-5555 or call 988. For all emergencies, dial 911. Thank you so much for tuning in this week to All In with Ali. We'll have more NFL. We'll have more hot stove in the offseason for MLB. We'll have all the other stories across the sports world, not just around the sports world, but here at UTRGV as well. We'll bring that to you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Join us next week, and have a great day, UTRGV. You stay classy.